that is, how many people did I count? Okay, let's go ahead and begin. This will take us to the end. It is a full hour and a half. But if I speak quickly, maybe we'll finish early. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. So, my name is Eve Smith, and I am a Senior English Language Fellow, welcoming you all here today to talk about teaching young learners important concepts. So these were all taken from two books, one by Caroline Lindsay and another by H. Douglas Brown. I will show you the reference material at the end in case you would like further information about any of the information we cover. Just to let you know who I am, as a Senior English Language Fellow, my responsibility is mainly to do teacher training. And for me, what teacher training is sharing knowledge that I have that has worked in class. I understand you're all teachers, you're all professionals. I'm not trying to tell you how to do your job. I'm just trying to share things that I have learned and have found successful. And so, because of this, for those of you who are new, you will find that I ask you a lot of questions. And I am hoping that you will respond. So that's my style of workshop presentation. A little bit more about the Senior Fellow Program. It's sponsored by the U.S. State Department, and they hire people who have several years of teacher training experience. I have around 7, and many years of teaching experience. I have over 15. And they send us to different areas around the world to work with teachers. And we are just providing resources, references, knowledge in a shared capacity. And that's what the Senior Fellow Program does. So I've been here for a year and a half, and I've had the privilege to work with something like over 2,000 teachers in Ukraine at this point. Not all in the ETRC. I do a lot of traveling into different areas and regions. So that's a little bit about me. Today we're going to start with turning this on so that it will move when I press the button. The role of the teacher. And the role of the teacher is obviously to provide developmentally appropriate instruction. So we look at this in two ways. We are providing care and we are providing instruction. So before I cover what these means, I want to make a distinction here. Very young learners in the United States are from the age of 3 to 6. Young learners are 7 to 12. So I'm going to try to focus, it's primarily on young learners, as you saw from the title, but I'll also offer some information for very young learners as well. Okay, so providing care. Why do we need to provide care to young learners?
They're young.
Yeah, and so what does that mean, Victor? Give me a little bit more. Why is it important?
Well, actually, it's our job to be a servant because we care about their knowledge, about how much they understand. If we don't care, we're indifferent. The progress doesn't show itself.
Okay, interesting. So you're actually touching on both of these. The first, providing instruction. I think you mentioned something that's pivotal to providing instruction, and that is being willing and able to acknowledge the strengths and weaknesses in all of our students that we're teaching. This is part of what I heard you say. Then the other part is part of our role when they're with us is to be a caretaker. We're obviously not the parents, but they still need guidance in a way that older students do not, right? They're still going to maybe have little fights and things like that. We're going to maybe still need to help them to tie their shoes. There are certain things that still has to happen. And that's part of providing care. So it's really important to recognize that we have to offer both, because sometimes people say, well, you know, we don't need to provide a lot of instruction because the students aren't developmentally there yet. But this is not necessarily true. It's important to provide both care and instruction because students evolve at different paces, right? And so for some of them, the instruction is important. They can grasp the instruction and they can internalize the instruction and produce what it is we wish for them to produce. Does that make sense? You with me? Yeah? Okay. So one of the important things in terms of providing instruction that we have to be aware of is multiple intelligences. Yay! Who can tell me what those are? Yeah.
There are 8 of them.
Okay.
So it can be music, one.
Uh-huh.
Then kinetic or mathematical.
Agents, maybe? Mathematical, kinesthetic, yeah.
Kinesthetic. Then
You don't need to list them all. I think we get the idea. If you have a student who is kinesthetic, how does that change your teaching? And all young learners are kinesthetic, right? So this is why I'm asking you this question, because we can all relate to it. How do you alter your teaching to make sure that the young learners can accept it?
Movement, games.
Okay, so you're adding a lot of movement, you're adding a lot of games, a lot of areas for them to attach the movement to what they're learning. Okay, good.
it can be done with different toys.
Absolutely. Toys, they can physically do things. Good. One of the ones that I use for drilling that's actually very hard, but they have a lot of fun with, this is for, I think, more, the age would be 10 and up. Under 10, it's too confusing. But say we were learning colors, and this is green, this is orange, this is obviously purple, we have red, we have a little, and they're sitting in circles, we have little circles, and you can do this to drill objects. So for example, this is a marker, and then she responds, a what? And I say, a marker. A what? A marker. Oh, a marker. And then she takes it and turns to the next person while I pick up another item. And at the same time we're going, this is a, and she says marker and I say pen, because now I have a new item. And then we respond, a what? A marker pen. A what? A marker pen. Oh, either a marker or a pen. And it gets very complicated, as you can see, because when you add many different items, it's very easy to make a mistake. But the structure and the fluidity, I think, of the activity makes it really fun for the students, and it really helps them to remember. I want to show you an example because I think when you describe something and when you do it, you have a different feeling, okay? I will not use a cup because that's full of stuff. Okay, sorry I stole your pen. You'll get it back. So if we start, we'd say, this is a marker. A what? A marker. A what? A marker. Oh, a marker. So I'd like you to all say that with me, okay? And then, when I give this to you, you continue the marker, but you have to turn back to me to take the pen. Do you want to be my role? And no? Okay. All right, are you ready? And you can see that the tune is catchy. So, and you'll also notice that I do this with my body a lot, okay? So this is a marker. A what? A marker. A what? A marker. Oh, a marker. Now everybody. This is a marker. A what? A marker. A what? A marker. Oh, a marker. This is a pen. A what? A marker. Pen. A what? A pen. Oh, a pen. Okay, and so you keep going, and you can see, like, you have a little dance too. So this is when you present. Oh, something, and then you pull back when you're getting new information, and you present. So it can be fun. All right, thanks. Is that one yours? Where's yours? Yes, it is yours. Okay. And you can do it with colors and many other things. Okay, so example of kinesthetic. Moving on from developmentally appropriate instruction. Let's just talk really quickly before we discuss some of the important aspects of young learners. What is the difference between language acquisition and language learning? Who can tell me? It's almost a quick trick. A trick question. Almost.
Maybe more about skills.
That's a good guess, and it's so close. If you could tell me more, it may even be right. Can anyone help? Add on?
Maybe acquisition is unconsciously.
Okay, good. Yeah.
To language, catch them.
For example,
And
young
language.
learners cannot translate word by word what was your home task for today, but they understand what I mean, and they can't translate it. They don't understand every word, but they can understand what am I talking about.
Okay.
Standard phrases.
That's because they've been drilled. Good. And absolutely, for language acquisition, it's basically the unconscious process of learning a language. We all go through language acquisition in order to speak our first language, right? Language learning is specifically focused on learning the language. So you're going over grammar, even if obviously with young learners, we're not going to say, okay, today we're going to talk about past perfect blah, 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 right? That's not going to work. But we do have things like drills and stuff like that, forms that we use to teach the language. So that's the difference between the two. I wanted to make sure that was clear because we want to make sure that we understand that even though the students at the age that we have them are still acquiring language subconsciously, they are also needing at this point to be specifically taught. And sometimes, I know when I first started teaching, I was thinking, oh, they're young, they'll just get it, which was obviously not the way that it happens. You still have to drill and you still have to repeat, and you still have to teach certain elements of the language. So that's important to consider. And also what's important within the language learning is consideration of how the students are developmentally. So we have characteristics of development. There are three main developmental processes. So we have social emotional development, and you can test for social emotional development by asking this question: how does the student interact with the group? The next the next characteristic of development is cognitive. What is cognitive? What is cognitive development? Can you rephrase that?
Practical knowledge. We acquire something.
Okay, that's close. I'm looking more in terms of cognitive, like mental, using their mental capacity to learn. And that looks like, how does the student acquire knowledge and understanding? Then we have physical development. So there's still, that characteristic is still present, especially for the lower end, right? The 7 and 8-year-olds. And this one looks like, how does the student move, and does he or she have coordination, and how well developed is that? So these are the different characteristics of development. And all of these obviously impact our students' ability to take in the information that we're giving in class. It also impacts what kind of information we want to relay to them in class. So I wanted to just give you a little test. And here is a chart of different activities. And what I would like for you to do is I would like for you in groups to come up with which ones are emotional social, which ones are cognitive, and which ones are physical. So in case it's hard to read, recognizing patterns, can skip, hop, run, takes turns easily, can follow 3-step instructions, likes reading, can catch or kick a ball, usually in a good mood, can hit a ball, knows letters, can use markers, can use scissors, can follow a sequence of events, has the capacity for humor, can negotiate, does not seem lonely, and has muscle control. So if you can use the questions that we looked at on this page, for social emotional, how does the student interact with the group? Cognitive, again, how does the student acquire knowledge and understanding? And then physical development, how does the student move? Do they have coordination? Use these questions to help you put this list in the right order, right? So which ones are emotional social, which ones are cognitive, which ones are physical? Questions? Okay, so just take like 3 minutes, I think, is probably enough to go ahead and order these.
Recognize confidence, cognitive. Likes reading, emotional, knows letters, cognitive, plus confidence. Next one is physical. Social.
Of course.
Social.
We can also move a chair up over here, y'all, if you want. Okay, so what we're doing is, these are the different characteristics, developmental characteristics that we have, and let me give you, okay, here are the questions that help you to identify which characteristics go under emotional, social, cognitive, or physical, and what you want to do is you want to order these. So for example, can use scissors. Would that be physical, would that be cognitive, or would that be emotional, social? If you need here's scrap paper if you need some. Does anybody else need scrap paper? Extra paper? No.
Can skip or can skip a lesson.
Skip, like that kind of skip. For the other kind of skip, you have to give me the age range where they start skipping.
To play twins.
Yeah. Okay, let me know when you're ready.
Значит, как у тебя душа, сыпется. Ну, слушай, думаю, что...
Okay, that was about 3 minutes. If you haven't finished, that's okay. Just check your answers with what we have here. So emotional, social, who can read this list for me? What appears under emotional, social? Out loud.
Takes turns easily, usually in a good mood, can negotiate, doesn't seem lonely, has a capacity for humor.
Okay, thank you. Who can read?
What about like reading?
Huh?
It's called.
Yeah, let's look at the cognitive.
It's an active partnership between the author and the reader, and I enjoy it.
You're using my own words against me. I love it. That's fantastic. But at that level, art, is it?
But I have pictures, illustration.
For emotional? You may have me reconsider. As it was defined in the book, it was cognitive. Because you're processing the information. But I can see your point. I would still argue it's cognitive. Because let's look at the emotional, social element, and let's notice what is the difference. Sorry, going this way. How does the student interact with the group? Right? So if we are using this definition, then the reading wouldn't follow necessarily in because it's not necessarily interaction with the group.
Yeah, I see, but some teachers practice DEAR. DEAR, it's an acronym. Drop everything and read. And it's emotional activity. You like your book. Especially now there won't be any report. You just read for pleasure.
And read and
I
write.
think-
Yes, read it.
I am okay with you maybe putting it in the middle, but I think that ultimately it is more of a cognitive process. Because again, if you're looking at the emotional, social level, it's how you emotionally relate to your peers. Your book is not really your peer. Is that, you're with me? But I do understand your reasoning, and if we were not looking at it from a peer perspective, I would say that you were probably right.
Actually, I included in both.
In both? Well, there you go. Okay, so for cognitive, did someone read that for me?
Recognizes patterns, can follow 3-step instructions like reading, knows letters, can follow a sequence of events.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, now physical from this side of the room. Hey, what's happening? Who's gonna read? Thank you.
Can skip, hop, run, can catch, kick a ball, can hit a ball, can use markers, can use scissors, has muscle control.
Okay, good. Yes, you even remembered the scissors when I didn't put it on there. Huh? Good job. Okay, so why is it really important to know this about our students?
To help them.
to help them to
to involve them in the process.
exactly. Okay, very nice. So, did you want to add who?
To prepare preparatory activities
Exactly. So all of this information is
and
stuff.
to know where to care, where they need care.
Exactly. We need to constantly be assessing where the students are falling under these developmental categories, because it really helps us to, as you said, either provide instruction or care for the students. So the next section is intellectual development. And one of the things that we want to pay attention to is that rules and explanations may not work, right? Because oftentimes they don't have the capacity, especially if they're long explanations. You need to just give them what is expected right then, in that moment. Okay, and then here, focus on the functional purpose of the language was exactly what, who was it? Was it you over here? No, in the back. When you were saying that they respond to the sentence, but they can't, so they have the whole view, but they can't look at the individual. And this is exactly the same thing. So you were ahead of me, which is excellent. Basically, if you want them to be able to communicate, you have to teach the words and the phrases together, because if you give them words and then you say put a sentence together, they'll be like, can't. So it's more important to look at what you want them to say, give them word chunks, I should say phrases, not just word chunks, and then let them manipulate that, as opposed to teaching from a bottom-up approach. It has to be more top-down. And for this one, the idea of being correct may get you strange looks. I think my example for this is that sometimes we have to really pay attention here to cognitive development. And for some learners, they are processing their own language as well as a second language, right? Actually, for all learners, they're doing that. And for some learners, they may be a little slower than the other learners. And an example of this is that with past tense in English, a native speaker problem is frequently adding ed to every end. So a child will say, I wented to the store. You say, oh, you went to the store. And they, yep, I wented to the store. And eventually they will self-correct and that will be handled. So, but if you say you went to the store, they clearly didn't hear the difference, right? When I did a recast and I said, oh, you went to the store? Yes, I wented to the store. They didn't hear the difference, and sometimes if you stop to correct, it's not helpful. They may be like, but I don't understand. You told me ED means I did something before. Why now does it not mean that? So you have to be really conscious of whether or not the correction is helpful, or whether or not they will be like, what? And get more confused. Does that make sense? Yep, okay. So, the next one after intellectual development is lesson in progress. Attention spans being the first thing. I think kids get, they have, I was going to say a bum rap about their ability to focus on something. But if you actually put them in front of a Disney cartoon for an hour, they are focused. So to me, what that says is they have a hard time on focusing things they're not interested in. Right? And so as a teacher, I look at that and I say, okay, wait a minute. This kid can focus on a Disney cartoon for an hour to 2 hours because they are emotionally connecting with it. How can I get my lessons to be at a level where they're emotionally connecting to the lessons, where they're having so much fun, they're not seeing it as work or as painful. And so for attention spans, that's one thing to think about. In terms of having them emotionally connect to it, obviously we want to make it meaningful. So activities that are here and now, meaning in the present, something that they can relate to in that moment, help to make it meaningful. And if you use their curiosity, a variation of activities could be the same theme but different types of activities. Animating yourself and having a sense of humor. All of these can help make it meaningful. For the have a sense of humor, I think this is very important. And I frequently point out mistakes that I make. And I laugh about them. Because one of the things that I want them to see is that the only thing a mistake means is that you can try again. And that you weren't perfect that time, and that's okay. But it provides an opportunity for you to make it better. To me, that's all a mistake means. And so I try to tell my students the same thing because I know there's a lot of pressure on them from testing and from parents and from the school system and everything that makes English or other languages seem very difficult and can be very scary because they make mistakes they don't understand. And maybe they don't have the capacity to understand. And so I want them to know that it's okay. I make mistakes too. And it's better to laugh at it and try again than to go, oh my gosh, I made a mistake, I'm horrible, I'll never get it. Right? So I want to start them early thinking this way so that they can learn to play with the language a little bit more. Is there anything you could add to this list that you do successfully to help make activities meaningful in your class?
Prizes.
Okay, all right. For some people, prizes, positive competition can work. I don't put people against each other. When I say positive competition, what I mean is teaching the students to compete against themselves, not against the other students, so that they understood that maybe they didn't do as well today and they can do better tomorrow, or they can try again, but it's not about, what's your name? Angelina. It's not me and Angelina competing. It's me competing and Angelina competing separately. Okay, good. Anything else? Anything else we do to create a meaningful environment? No? That's good? All right. I'll leave it at that. To continue our discussion, here are a few more things that we want to use to help us keep it meaningful. So this you've heard me talk a lot about. Does anyone remember the formula I gave you for this?
To get the progress, the difficulty shouldn't be too great.
That's right. That's right. And do you remember what researcher? See, pop quiz, eh? What researcher? That's okay, that's okay. Let me know. I'll give his last name. Krashen. In, I think it was 82 or 83, 1982 or 83, he defined the comprehensible input level, which is, as Victor said, just a little bit above what they can already do. And that keeps it interesting for them, so it keeps them engaged. If it's too easy, what happens?
They're not
Greatly
interested.
boring.
Yeah, they're not bored. I mean, they're boring. They're boring. They're bored. They're not interested. And then what happens to your classroom management? There is none, right? Because they're all talking to each other because they're bored out of their mind. So that's why we want to do this. Context helps you to prepare your students. So basically what this means is make sure you pre-introduce vocabulary, topics, anything. So this is like your warm-up activities, yeah? Making sure you give them enough background information that they can, so that they can understand the activity you're going to give them. And then finally we have the zone of proximal development and scaffolding. In a lot of the research, actually, zone of proximal development and scaffolding are used interchangeably. There is a small difference, We're not going to go into it today because it's not really that important for what we're talking about, but I wanted to mention the relationship between those two. And in order to explain the zone of proximal development, I just wanted to show you a picture because I think that it's an easier way to explain it than just going through a bunch of vocabulary. Does anyone know who created the zone of proximal development? Or who identified it? He didn't create it. I just gave you a clue, it's a guy. Does Vygotsky ring any bells to anyone? Vygotsky, researcher? Okay, so this is what I can do, what I have mastery over. This purple is what I can do with help. And so the zone of proximal development is that basically you present activities that they can do, but they need a little bit of help doing it. The help could come from the teacher, the help could come from the peer. But ultimately, it's good to consider the zone of proximal development and use scaffolding in the lessons so that the students can do harder activities because they have enough scaffolding or they have enough help built into the activity that they can complete it successfully. Okay. Questions, comments, or concerns? Okay, so Vygotsky wrote about this in 1978. All right, learning about your students' interests. So now that we have all of, I guess, more of the background information that we need in order to consider our students and their development, I guess their developmental characteristics, we are now going to transition into, okay, so we know those characteristics, how do we put it to work in the classroom itself? And so part of that is, through learning our students' interests, we can easily make them more motivated to be in the class. So one of the ways to do this, one of the activities to find out about our learners is to have a children's treasures. So children's treasures is more or less like a show and tell where they bring in something that's very meaningful for them and then they talk about it. So you can have them bring one object once a week. You could have them bring it and keep it in the talking and writing box. So the talking and writing box is full of mini objects that they feel attached to emotionally. And you use those objects in activities. You use those objects to stimulate role plays. You use those objects to stimulate storytelling, things like that. Surveys are another way that we can learn about the learner. And I have in this book, which is Primary Activity Box, I have a really nice set of surveys. This one is where they, this is the ages around 9 through 11, and they draw a picture of themselves. And then under the picture, they are answering some questions like, I'm whoever they are. I'm Eve. My hair is brown. My eyes are hazel. My favorite blah is blah. So you're getting some information. And then normally when I do it, I post these on around the room so that they feel happy because they have something on the wall that they created. And I feel happy because I can just go through this and say, ooh, my favorite color is, my favorite toy is, and I have information about them that I can use when I'm planning my lessons to try to include that so that they are interested. For older learners, so again, this is Primary Activity Box, there's a wonderful book that we have here at the ETRC that is called Surveys for Conversation. These surveys, it depends on the level. So they're a little more complicated, but there are surveys about exercise. celebrations, back to school. And you can check this book out once you become a member. You can check either of these books out once you become a member. And for example, this one is photocopyable, so you can just make the copies. It's already pre-done and use it in class. This one I like to use for ideas of different surveys that I can do with the students to get their interest. Get a better idea of their interest, I should say. Okay. Talking and writing box, if I don't want them to bring objects, sometimes I'll just bring pictures. And then games that include teamwork. So this is very important. One thing that we do want to remember when we are having them work in teams is that developmentally, the younger the learner, the more we want to have them in teams that they usually work with. Because it's stressful for them to interact with students, even though they're in the same class, it's stressful for them to interact with new students in their group or their team. They feel more safe and secure when they're interacting with students that they are comfortable with. This is a book called Shenanigan Games, and Shenanigans is practicing and playing with English grammar, basically. And there are several teamwork activities in here. These are a little bit older, and they're a little bit more advanced, but there are some grammar games that you could play with them that would be more at their level. This one, they have to solve a mystery, and so it's very interesting. You have all the information about all the characters in the mystery, and then on the next page, they have to go through all the characters, create their alibis, and then decide who the thief was. And you're practicing where were you when. Okay, so that one has a lot of activities for teamwork. Does anyone else have some activities that they practice in class that they have found is really helpful to learn more information about their students? Especially like in the beginning, when you're first meeting a new group of kids.
Well, what about rhymes?
Okay, so tell me how you use it to learn about them.
They're easy to memorize. So when you recite many times and they learn vocabulary, and it's funny for them maybe because you select special rhymes for the age with illustration.
Okay, that's good. That's good for activities, but I think maybe if they wrote rhymes about themselves, then that would help us because we're wanting to learn more about them, right? So what they like, what are their hobbies, and I'm not sure that rhymes would tell us that much unless they were rhymes about themselves or rhymes about their families. But that would be a good idea to have them make rhymes about themselves. Anybody else?
You know, there are such table games when you go and you have some questions. So there's also the same about like what's your favorite color. So a child go with I don't know something through this
A
game,
game piece.
and and answers the questions.
Okay, great. Good.
You can use survey and students ask each other. One student asks everybody, you have got 1 minute, how many people can you ask for 1 minute? And to know their favorite color, your task is to know favorite animal.
Right.
And so, and you have them 1 minute or 2 minutes and the study go and they and ask each other and tell you about each other.
Sure, absolutely. There was also, in addition to surveys, the book that is here, you can also do bingo with them. Same sort of thing, right? Where find someone who likes blue, likes red, and then you write their name in it as well. And then you can collect the bingo cards and find the information out about the students. Okay, so more information about this survey. We want to make sure they can express themselves when we give them the survey, right? It's useless if they can't actually answer the questions on the survey. So for this, if I were teaching in a language that I also spoke, so their first language was a language that I also spoke, I may actually have them do the survey in their first language because, again, the purpose is for me to get to know them, and having them be fully self-expressed in their first language would achieve that, and then we can switch to English later. Follow up privately with the students. So once we have the survey, this is not the end, right? We want to continue to develop our knowledge and their comfort level with us. And then giving positive reinforcement. And with this, one of the things that I learned is, and this is funny because in the US, oftentimes we hear, you're so smart, great job, good work, blah, 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 blah. And I started emulating that because that had been my model for many years when I was growing up as a student, right? And you know that by the time you become a teacher, you've internalized thousands of hours of instruction, and so oftentimes you model what your teachers, the way they taught you, right? So this is, I was using what they taught me. And then I read a piece of research that said that actually the best positive reinforcement to give them is not necessarily you're so smart or you're this or you're that, but good work, and I like it that you are working hard. You're a very hard worker. This is good. And the reason for that is because when you say you're a very hard worker, this is good, it reinforces the idea that they can achieve something. It may take them time, it may take them several failures, but eventually they will get it because they are hardworking. Versus you're so smart, when they don't get it and they go, oh my gosh, I'm not so smart, oh, blah, 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 and they have like a panic attack because their ego and their self-definition was not met by the way that they were able to achieve the task, then they are crushed. But if you say things like you're very hardworking, I can see that maybe you didn't answer it successfully now, but I know that you will. This is more rewarding for them.
But if I say, well, I like your hard work, wouldn't it be a little bit euphemism? I mean, when they mean something different?
Like what?
Well, if somebody is fat, I can say, not directly that person is fat, but use, my sentence would be something different, but the idea is, well, you're fat.
Well, if you're not using in that way, I don't think they're going to make that connection.
Well,
You know, if you're, okay, we're pretending she's very lazy and I like your hard work, you know, then obviously that's rude and not appropriate as a teacher. But if they're actually working hard and you say, I appreciate that you work hard,
no,
I
but
think that
do it with-
eventually you'll
I do
get
it
this.
with irony.
But why would you do that?
I'm dissatisfied with somebody, but I say, well, I appreciate your hard work. If somebody's ugly, I say, well, but you have a charming smile.
Okay, but all right. Well, this is the individual choice of the teacher. I am not going to imply things. I will be direct, and this may be an American thing. But if I see a student that's not working in a way that I would prefer, I might actually address the issue to them and to the parents and say something like, you know, I can see that you're struggling with this, and I know that if you work on it more, you will get better. But if you don't work on it, you will not improve. So this is your choice. But if I were to tell her, like, instead, if I were to say, oh, you're so hardworking, then how would she feel? Right? She's not going to feel very good, right? How would you feel if I did that to you, y'all? Would you come back? Probably not. You would never want to see me again. But if I approached you and I said, okay, so this is what most of the other students are doing, this is what you're doing. What do you notice about this? Are you doing the same amount of work? No. So in order to get better, you're going to have to do that amount of work. and I make it their choice. And so maybe, I mean, this is probably not going to be a very exciting conversation for them. They will be upset because you're pointing out something that is not comfortable. But I think that by giving them the choice, that they can engage, they can work harder, and by saying something like, you know, if you are confused about how to work, talk to me, I can help you. There are some tricks to learning another language, and I can teach you some of those tricks if you want. You know, these tricks are the strategies, right? Making like vocabulary, like using devices and stuff to help you remember it, things like that. Because there's a lot of different reasons that students aren't working hard, and I would prefer to address it directly and ask them if there's something going on than to just assume that they're lazy and to kind of like attack a little bit. Does that make sense? How do other people address it? Because this is my way. Doesn't mean it's the best way, right? How do you all address it? If you notice that a particular student is not working as hard as the others or is struggling, what do you do?
Well, I noticed that in American literature, the word challenge is very popular. Do it because it's a challenge for you. And in our literature, we never come across this word. It's a homework, do it, but not like it's a challenge.
Okay, so do you think that saying this is a challenge would be helpful?
Better than it is a homework.
Okay, alright, that's fair. Better than it's homework. Anyone else?
I think it's right with the sometimes you should say to someone that they're doing and someone else is somebody likes to hear they're doing and somebody vice versa is embarrassed or shy because of that thing they're doing. But I don't think that we need to attack.
Definitely. I think attacking is going to create a very negative situation. Some of you may remember the story I told you about my little angel in Russia, and some of you this will be the first time hearing it, but I think that one of the reasons that there was a child that I used to teach in Russia, I was co-teaching with a Russian teacher, and he was wonderful, which is why I just called him the little angel, right? He was very active, he was passing out homework, he was collecting homework, he was passing out handouts, he was doing everything. And he studied, and he was good in class. And some other teachers from the same school came, and they asked us later, what did you do to this child? And we're like, we didn't do anything, what do you mean? And basically, he had a reputation for being like the worst child in the school. And he would get up randomly and run around the classroom in the middle of a lesson. He would try everything possible to take the teacher off track. And part of the reason for that was because people had made him feel alienated. They had made him feel like he wasn't good enough, that he wasn't smart, and they had created this idea that the student had about who he was as a student, which was not the reality of who he wanted to be as a student. And so I think when we consider giving positive reinforcement, like, children know when you're authentic, when you say something, when you say it from your heart rather than a negative place. And so they will understand the difference and they will respond to you in kind. So I would be authentic. And I would still be careful to say, I mean, your good is okay, but I really want to focus on the action that they're doing being good, because I want to positively reinforce what they're doing. For example, you just wrote something on your paper. I would say, very good, you're taking notes. It tells me that you're listening. Good work. so it's very specific descriptions that they're getting. Okay, talking and writing box. This is another way to get them engaged, and this is, as you can see, both a listening speaking activity as well as possibly a reading writing activity. So the talking writing box can be a collage if you don't have an actual box. Basically, it's a box full of their treasures or pictures. And so they can make pictures if they can't write yet. They can make the pictures into a collage, and then they can talk about their collage in whatever way they can, whatever language that they have. Or if they can write a biography. Maybe they can make both the collage and write the biography to kind of connect whatever vocabulary you're doing in class with themselves. Okay, so that's one activity. So one of the things we do have to consider, as mentioned previously, is can they read and write in their native language? Because if they can't read and write in their native language, it's going to be very hard for them to read and write in English. So this is a very important point, right? Does anyone have 3 very practical ways that they use to learn about the student's development and or their interests? So I just presented some to you, some of the ways that I use. We talked about surveys being one practical way. What else?
Treasures.
The treasures, okay. And tell me more about that.
They can bring and present their treasures and
Okay.
they characterize them.
Okay, okay. Anyone else? What else do you do in class?
For making projects, like to tell about when they're speaking about their families, they also tell them what are they doing in their free time.
Okay, great. Connecting different topics together as well. Good. Anything else?
Yep. Sometimes some very simple things may characterize them. For example, not treasures, but to ask children to bring some very simple object. Once
Cube.
yeah, once I asked them to bring a cube, but they brought very different. And one guy brought this size cube of his.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and different colors, and somebody brought a cube they made with their own. So
Great.
it was.
And we call those cubes blocks.
Okay, no,
Blocks.
Blocks, yeah. Good. Anyone else? Yeah.
Usually I start out with a warmer,
Uh-huh.
which is really a preview of last session,
Okay.
but an introductory of the target language.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of go around with groups with young learners and have them basically to regurgitate some things, and that pretty much lets me know if it sunk in or not.
Okay, good. And so you're also analyzing maybe at the same time what sunk in, and that allows you to see what was
Yeah,
working and what
yeah.
wasn't working about the activities that you were doing.
Yeah.
Nice. Good share. Okay, anyone else? Okay, thank you. So, talking about language. So we mentioned it a little bit earlier. But we want to do a whole language approach. And so basically what that is we want the 4 skills together, right? We want to work with listening, speaking, reading, writing in all of the lessons.